When my dad was tragically taken away, our whole world was turned upside down.
Real life starts now.
This is Real Life Radio Show with On Lay.
I felt alone. I felt lost. I felt scared.
Real stories.
I was so desperate in living such a dark and callous life.
Real people.
I was thinking there was no purpose for my life. There's no reason for me to be here.
Real problems.
I told my dad, if you try to take these drugs, I'm going to kill you.
One solution. God.
Hope is a person, and his name is Jesus.
And now your host, On Lay.
Hi, this is Evangelist On Lay. Welcome to the Real Life Radio Show. We're going to talk about real people who have had real problems and they found answers in a real God. Today we have someone who had a perfect Christian life until her dad died and everything went into chaos, including her own life and her morals. You know, when personal tragedies happen, we can often isolate and lose hope. We can live a life where the meaning and the purpose starts to become super fuzzy. Have you ever been there? Is there hope when you feel hopeless? I think our guest will encourage you after she shares what happened to her. Amber, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. What a pleasure.
Yeah. Amber, tell us about your life before your father passed away. Would you describe it as a pretty put together life?
Yeah, I think we were kind of like that Brady Bunch kind of family. My dad was a dentist orthodontist and a pastor.
Wow.
And so we all played sports. It was just kind of that all-American family. I grew up with three brothers and myself and a small town. And yeah, we just had kind of not without problems, but yeah, kind of that perfect little ideal small town Texas family.
Yeah, but really wholesome interactions. And it seems like your father played a huge part in your guys' lives.
Yeah, he did. He was the glue that kind of held us all together in that, typical family kind of way. He raised us with our faith. He raised us in church. And, we had all those kind of morals and ethics growing up. And we were a tight, close family.
Wow. But then something happened. Amber, how did your father pass away?
So my parents were on the way back from a roping. It's something my dad had picked up as a hobby later in life and started roping. And my whole family was in it. My three brothers, my mom, and my dad.
Oh.
And on the way home, I was meeting them for dinner. And they had called to tell me they were headed home. And a drunk driver going between two towns who had lost his brother that same day, 2 years prior, was drinking and driving in between the two towns going back and forth.
Oh my gosh.
And clocked going over 100, hit my parents head on.
What?
In a car wreck, claiming my dad's life, but then injuring my mom beyond recognition.
Oh my
another brother
gosh.
on life support. And everyone was care flighted to different hospitals. And that left me at 16 to try to make any decision I could for all my family members.
Wow. So here you are, 16. I mean, that's a very vulnerable age. And to find out, how did you find out?
So I was at home waiting for the phone call when they got to the restaurant. And so our phone rang. Back then it was funny because, you had your parents' line and then your regular line.
Yeah.
And so our parents' phone rang and it was kind of late. And I thought, oh gosh, somebody called the wrong number late, and I answered the phone and it was somebody hysterical on the other end saying, your parents have been in a bad car wreck.
Oh
and I was
gosh.
thinking to myself, oh gosh, now it's late. I'm going to have to go out and pick them all up. And so I said,
You're thinking of something small.
yeah, I don't think you ever think you're going to get the phone call that somebody's passed away that's close to you in your life.
Oh my gosh.
I definitely didn't. And, just saying it again, it just sends chills up my back because of that time. You just really don't think that's what the answer is going to be. And the person on the other end, when I ask, well, okay, where are they? I'll go get them. And she said, no, Amber, it's bad. There's care flights, there's ambulance. You can't go there.
Oh, no.
And that's when I realized something really, really bad had happened.
Oh, no.
And then you go into, panic mode at that point of shock.
Wow.
I went to the first hospital then and saw my oldest brother, and my mom was mangled beyond recognition at another hospital.
Oh, no.
And when I walked in and saw her, I had to ask if that was my mother. I only recognized her clothes.
Oh, my gosh.
My other brother was on life support fighting for his life. And my youngest brother was at another children's hospital, totally separate somewhere else. So,
Gosh.
yes, it was very, very tragic. You think, even though I grew up in the faith and, kind of knowing about it, I think at a certain point, I don't know how well we're prepared for those type moments of our life.
I think a lot of us can say that when we're living our lives and tragic things happen, it shocks us. But then you actually got the news. So eventually you got the news that your father passed away. Tell me about that moment.
Yeah, so knowing that my dad was kind of the leader of our family, I kept asking for my dad. When I got to the first hospital and I saw my brother and they were taking him back, ironically, I was passing him on the hospital bed as they were wheeling him back, and he's screaming, "Pray for Dad. Dad needs our help. Pray for Dad. Dad needs our help." That's all he could say.
My gosh.
And he's covered in blood from head to toe, and I'm shocked at that. I'm sitting there, so I keep saying, "Just take me to my dad. Just take me to my dad." And nobody will answer me. And finally, one of the nurses came in and said, "Sugar, your dad's already at the funeral home. He didn't make it."
Oh my gosh.
And at that point, it's taken me many years to realize, but at that point is where I lost hope.
Wow.
I lost all hope, and where I started to spiral downward,
Wow. It's so sad because a lot of people, they tend to get mad at God when some type of tragedy hits their lives.
Yeah.
How did you feel? I mean, you must have not only lost hope, but there must have been sadness, anger, confusion. Tell me about it.
Yeah, for a long time I said I never got angry at God because I had grown up knowing you're not supposed to get angry at God. That's what I'd always been taught. But inadvertently, as I went through my journey of kind of pulling myself out of this funk that I went into, I learned that I didn't directly blame God, but I was giving him credit for all the bad in my life.
Yeah.
And so that inadvertently was me blaming God. In a sense, I didn't trust him for all the good. I just associated him with the bad that was about to come in my life. From that moment on is where I derailed. And I believe that was set in from just the loss of hope, just thinking the pain was going to last for forever.
So you went from maybe going to live like a totally Christian, pure lifestyle, just go to church and sports. But then where did your life go from there?
Well, that went to my mom in and out of the hospital for years, many, many, many surgeries on lots of medications. My brother that was on life support was deemed mentally incapable and unstable. He was also doing a lot of things where he had lost his mind. And then I had my little brother who was injured, and he was 8. And I pretty much became a caretaker, a mother, and a sister to a brother who just couldn't keep up. My oldest brother left and went to college and was playing football. And I was overwhelmed by all of the stresses and responsibilities and the heartache and tragedy. So I tried to start self-medicating, running from anything to get away from the pain. And unfortunately, none of that was running to my faith.
So self-medicating, like alcohol, drugs, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So, I started drinking at a young age, and that always leads to more bad choices and wrong people and wrong crowds. And I'd always played sports. So I tried to stay playing sports. I think what I learned to do, what I think a lot of us learn to do, is start living a split life. You're in one responsibility, trying to keep up with your sports and your school and being a cheerleader and all that kind of jazz that you do in high school. And then after, at night, going out and drinking and hanging out with friends and doing things you shouldn't be doing and living a kind of a split life, not knowing how to pull yourself out of either. It's almost like you're not living a reality on either side. And I'm that all-American, blonde-haired, blue-eyed girl that was pretty unpopular. You just didn't think this would be part of my story.
Wow. You were talking about how as you're going through kind of this fuzzy phase of your life, and you didn't really know the direction of your life, that the world ended up abusing you in this state of hopelessness. Tell me a specific instance of that.
Well, I think when you talk about the fuzziness of life and when you lose hope, losing hope loses direction. And when you get lost in that world, you just start trusting whatever's in front of you. And that became something I just wasn't familiar with. And I put my naive trust in a lot of people who then violated me, abused me physically, mentally. I got into bad, broken relationships that I trusted my heart with that before I probably never would have. you know, and because of pain and hardship, and I was so naive in it that I just started trusting, you know, people that I shouldn't have.
Like anybody and everybody, right?
Yeah. And I just started following their behaviors. And that belief sets in of, oh, well, I've done it once, so I might as well just keep doing it, you know, or you just don't see why not.
Wow.
You know, it's an escape. And so you start drinking and going out and looking for the next big hype to take you away, the next big party, the next bar, you know, all of that, which leads you into that world of trusting something that is just going to basically end up hurting you.
How did that hurt you? Like, how did you end up feeling at the end of all that as, you know, you're doing it? And
just completely broken.
Oh.
You know, that old cliche, when you've hit your lowest, your back's against the ground, but you have nowhere but to look up. That's genuinely where I ended up.
Wow. So you were feeling depressed. You were feeling down.
I mean, you feel so ashamed. You feel guilty. You feel like hiding. That really pushed me into isolation a lot, you know, into that split life kind of thing, you know, where by day I would live one way and by night I lived another. And you just wouldn't think that I would struggle with those type things because I had the persona of the all-American blonde hair, blue-eyed girl. But by day I tried to live up to that image. And by night I was struggling with what the world was doing to me and the choices I was making.
Yeah.
And then it starts to isolate you from good, you know, the goodness of your life. And then you find almost like a comfort in the wrong, which is crazy, but it is what happened. You know, I kind of found where drinking and going out felt more comfortable than not, and being responsible, going to church or doing something good, like going to work and staying on schedule and staying on time.
That felt uncomfortable, like almost out of your skin.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the other starts to feel comfortable. You just get so used to living that life. I was tired of my own self. I was tired of my own mistakes. I was tired of the hurts and the pains and all of that. And that's when I found myself at my lowest point.
Wow. So how did you find hope again in Jesus after being so mistreated by the world?
You know, inside, I knew that I needed to find something to pull me out. Because I had known Jesus prior to, I knew that he was the answer. I didn't know how to find him on my own. I just knew that I cried out. I just said, I'm tired of living this way. How do I find you, Lord? How do I get help from you? And I went to church and I went to my first Christian counselor. At that point, I rededicated my life at church. I went down and I said, Lord, I need you like I've never needed you in my life before. And I repented. I asked for forgiveness. And repentance was, you know, you have to stop doing what you were doing and turn and go a different way. Right?
Yeah.
He forgives us, but we have to turn. And I wasn't even sure how to turn. So I went to a Christian counselor who told me to go that day and buy a Bible and buy a great book called Boundaries by Henry Cloud.
And I think that's amazing because just like you said, some people want to turn, but they don't know how to. Like they feel like they kind of want to. And sometimes I feel like the longer someone sits in that feeling without any action, that desire can easily be melted away, you know?
Yeah. You know, you still have your same friends, right? Just because you go to church one day and you repent and ask the Lord to come into your life or rededicate your life, you turn out of there and it's still the same thing when you leave. So at that point's when I say the rubber meets the road. And I had to say no to my friends when they were all calling me and asking me to go out. And I literally sat in my living room crying while they were all out having fun. But I knew that I didn't want to live that life anymore. And I knew just not going was better than going.
Wow.
So I read my books. I found some good movies that I like to watch and watched them and cried reading my Bible, my book for, a good couple of months every night to keep myself from going to the ways that I had been living.
But then in this time, you know, instead of just kind of being a Christian, you actually discovered a real relationship with the Lord during this time.
Yeah, I found my best friend. I found my counselor. I found my father. I found my comfort. my peace. It's crazy when you live a life like that split life. It's almost like living a life on a roller coaster.
Yeah.
After you rode a roller coaster and you go stand on the ground, it still feels like you're on it. You're like, whoa,
Yeah.
You're just kind of like, Well, God promises to be the rock of our life. And the closer I got, the more I learned about him. And that's how we get closer to him. I mean, if you want to find a best friend, you have to know everything about them. So in order to find a best friend, I had to start learning who Jesus was. And that came through a counselor, that came through books, that came through reading the word, that came through going to church. And I started setting those things into my life and not allowing anything to deter me from him.
Wow.
And the closer I got to him, the more solid I could stand on ground, and peace and comfort came.
Wow. I'm hearing from you, like you became more confident, more of like you knew who you were.
Yeah, it's amazing about God. What he does is his love goes into our life and is able to start mending what was broken by the world, which strengthens you to be able to stand against the things that you used to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it was extremely hard to not go out with my friends and, go party and have fun. But those ways led me to where I was. And I knew I didn't want to be in that place anymore in my life. I wanted peace.
Amber, let me ask you a question, because somebody right now is listening and they're kind of in that spot where, they feel like something has happened to them, that they've lost all their value. There isn't any hope. And they're kind of listening. They're like, is there any hope for me? And actually, they're sitting on the edge of their seat wondering, is there hope for me? What would you say to that person right now?
I would say absolutely there's hope. I give an analogy of a penny all the time. I take two pennies. You have an old penny and a new penny. The old penny is dingy looking. The new penny is shiny copper. One's been touched, abused, and passed around. The other one has not. But they still spend the same. God created us with the same value in us, regardless of what has happened in our life. We just have to learn. If we were to take that penny back to the Creator, they could shine that penny up to look brand new again.
Wow.
That's what we have in Jesus.
Wow.
That's the hope we have in him. No matter what you've been through, your value is still the same. He put you here for a plan and a purpose with a calling on your life for this very moment in time.
Amber, that is so good. Amber, thank you so much for being on our show, sharing how Jesus has totally transformed your life. Truly, it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Hey, don't turn that dial. Let's talk a little bit more right after the break.
Real Life is made possible this week with the help of On Fire Merchant Services and our Awakening the Nation's monthly giving partners. If you own your own business taking Visa and MasterCard, call and get a quote from On Fire Merchant Services. On Fire Merchant Services is on fire to serve you. Look them up at onfiremerchantservices.com or call them at 877-333-6682. That's onfiremerchantservices.com or 877-333-6682. Real Life Radio is a ministry of Awakening the Nations, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that depends on your donations. If you would like to find out more about Awakening the Nations or make a tax-deductible donation, please visit our website at awakeningthenations.com or call us at 877-480-4477. That's awakeningthenations.com or 877-480-4477. More Real Life starts now.
Welcome back, where we're going to go deeper into what you just heard. You know what I really heard in this show? I heard that there's so many people walking around not knowing their value in their lives. You? Do you feel like you have value in your life? What makes us feel like we do or do not have value? It could be that we lose something or that we get rejected by a relationship, maybe lose some type of job status, and then it can leave us feeling pretty worthless. Have you been there? I know I have. But where does your value actually come from? Who says that you have value or don't have value? And if you have value, how valuable are you? I tell you the truth, your value is not in how much money you have. Let me give you an example. Value is based upon the purchaser when you're talking about goods, right? So if one purchases an item for a very large price, it ups the value of that type of thing. Well, think about what God has paid for you. He has paid the price of his very own son, the blood of his son, Jesus Christ. He paid more than money. He paid with his own son's blood. Matthew chapter 26, verse 28, it says, "For this is my blood of the new covenant, which is shed for the many for the remission of sins. Jesus shed his blood for you. He purchased you from the devil. You are valuable. Father God, I'm praying for this revelation for the person who's saying, gosh, my life is wrecked. I don't have any value. I don't have any purpose. You do. There is greater value in you. And God knows that because he paid the price for you. So Lord, give them that revelation right now of what you had paid for them. What is really the potential that is there. I'm asking for that revelation to be passed right now in Jesus' mighty name. Well, I hope you're blessed by this testimony, and I know that your life was touched.
If you need prayer, please give us a call at 877-480-4477. That's 877-480-4477. See you next time.